Well, good morning, everyone. Jim Brett here at the New England Council, and welcome to the November installment of Inside the Corner Office. It's been a very busy fall for the New England Council, capped off with our incredibly successful annual celebration last week. And we'd just like to thank all of you who joined us and who have continued to support the New England Council's outstanding work. And we hope all of you will join us again on December 7th to ring in the holiday season and celebrate another successful year at the New England Council. It will once again be held at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate here in Boston. If you haven't RSVP'd yet, please visit our website and secure your spot. Well, today, delighted to welcome an incredible leader in our region's energy industry. Cynthia Hansen is the Executive Vice President and President, Gas Transmission and Midstream at Enbridge, which is the largest natural gas supplier to New England. In this role, she has responsibility for Enbridge natural gas pipeline and midstream business, not just here in New England, but across North America. She brings with her to this role over 2 decades of experience in leadership in the energy sector. We're so pleased that she could join us today to share more about her career journey and Enbridge work to provide safe and reliable energy to our region. Cynthia, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim. It is such a pleasure to join you here today and to have this opportunity to connect with you and others in the New England Council.
You know, Cynthia, when we have CEOs on our program, we always start by talking a little bit about the background and the career path, because people are fascinated how people, end up in these, significant and important positions. So I've done some research on your background. I read that you were born and raised in Canada, but your first job was working for your father in oil field services. That's most unusual, to say the least. But can you share a little more about your early career path and what brought you from Canada to the United States?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So my dad was blessed with 3 daughters. I was the oldest, and he was a bead pressure ticket welder. And he installed in us our work ethic, and part of that was being his welder's helper for a period of time during our summer opportunities to work and support him. So that was my first introduction to working in oil field services. And besides being a welder, he had some support services that my sisters and I were involved with. So that's when I was first involved with the oil sector. Now my career started back in the 80s in public accounting. So I articled with Coopers and Lybrand that then became PricewaterhouseCoopers. I had an opportunity to support a wide variety of businesses as I supported various finance and accounting needs. I then had the opportunity to join Enbridge, starting in the financial reporting area for them, but made the transition into operations to support our operations team fairly early on. And then I have had a variety of really exciting and challenging jobs with Enbridge, both on the finance side and operations and health and safety. And I've had the opportunity to move to multiple locations with Enbridge and across our business units, from liquids pipelines to our corporate services to our gas utility, and now leading our GTM operations out of Houston. So I moved from most recently Toronto to Houston as part of Enbridge, transitioning from leading our gas utility in Toronto to now leading our GTM operations based out of Houston.
So obviously all those different business units that you just mentioned with the company has obviously helped you to be very successful in your current role. And I was just wondering, in that role, that you have responsibility for, in particular, natural gas pipeline in the midstream business. Again, not just here in New England, but across North America. Can you talk a little more about that? That's a significant position to have.
So one of the things that I loved about my, over 2-decade long career with Enbridge is that I have had that opportunity to lead very diverse teams. So whether that has been in our financial reporting or helping to lead enterprise-wide IT implementations or addressing field operations activities, it's been working with a wide cross-section of individuals. So different locations, I've led teams, as you mentioned, Jim, that are very geographically dispersed.
Mm-hmm.
So from, I've led teams from north of the Arctic Circle in Norman Wells now to offshore in the Gulf. And that is allowed me to really learn a lot about people and how, while they have lots of individual expertise and knowledge and experience to contribute, there's a lot of things that people have in common as well. So basically, my opportunity to lead has come about because I've been given these great experiences and opportunities to work with really diverse people from diverse backgrounds, drive towards a common goal, and ensure that we are clear about what our purpose is, and that's fueling people's quality of life with energy, and working together to deliver on that goal.
As you know, the energy sector is still a very male-dominated industry, especially in senior leadership roles like yours. Can you talk a little more about your experience as a woman in the industry, and then how to get more women into careers in the energy field?
Yeah. So I think I've been very fortunate, and it probably goes back to the experience that I had working with my father. He and the experiences that I had very early in my career positioned me to not feel isolated, even if I was the only female in any of those given situations. So I think that for me, it was a skill that I was able to develop fairly early on in my career, to just work with people as people and recognize that once you as an individual are able to demonstrate your skills, expertise, knowledge, ability to work with others, then gender wasn't as much of an issue. I think that the real opportunity for us today to continue to attract more and more women into our industry, and particularly into that frontline field work, is just to kind of break down the stereotypes on both sides. So that is the type and skill sets that are required to complete jobs, and the type of job opportunities that there are. So besides being a female, I'm not very physically large, but there's many, many opportunities for women and people of diverse backgrounds, experience, size to really contribute to our industry. We need to continue to do that outreach, and we need to, show women what kinds of jobs are currently being filled and how they can see themselves in that role. So it's critically important for people to imagine that they can do that job. So for there to be role models, or for there to be that specific outreach. And then we do need to have that support. Again, I was very fortunate to have some really strong mentors and sponsors as I went through my career. And the mentors and sponsors that I had included both male and female mentors and sponsors. And that was really important for me. And I think that's what we need to do to attract more and more women into critical positions within the energy industry and frontline field jobs.
You know, as I mentioned earlier, Enbridge is New England's largest natural gas supplier. But for those in our audience who may not be familiar with the company, can you just tell us a little more about the footprint here in the region?
Yeah, so building on what you said, Jim, Enbridge is one of North America's largest energy infrastructure companies, and we deliver that energy that fuels people's quality of life, helping them to meet their day-to-day needs and making sure that the energy is sustainable, reliable, and particularly affordable. So some quick stats on GTM. So we're serving over 170 million people and supporting 10% of LNG exports in the US. And we move over 20% of the natural gas consumed in the US. And in fact, our Texas Eastern, Algonquin, and Maritimes and Northeast systems are critical to serving those in the Northeast. Algonquin starts in New Jersey and transports natural gas into New England for use by the local gas utilities, power plants, and of course, industrial customers. Our Maritimes and Northeast pipelines operate in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, and Canada. So together, those two pipelines provide a very significant portion of the energy needs to heat homes and generate power. And about half of power generation in New England is currently fueled by natural gas. So we're helping to keep businesses running and industry operating. And we do take pride in that critical role that we play every day, making sure that people can get home, cook their meals, heat their water, and ensuring that the economy continues to grow and thrive. And that's making a big difference. And we know that there's a big responsibility attached to that too. And we take that very seriously, making sure that things run smoothly. And we're also leading in that energy transition. So we at Enbridge are really committed to making sure that we continue to support that path to a greener future.
That was my next question. And obviously you touched on it about your role that you play in that transition along with renewables. You seem to be a leader in that field. So, congratulations on that. But, there are some incredible new technologies being used to decarbonize the natural gas industry. Can you just tell us what Enbridge is doing in this space?
Yeah. So before I switch to the new stuff that's going on, I just want to reinforce that natural gas has been and will continue to be vital to meeting consumers' energy needs as we move through to that lower carbon future. As you mentioned, Enbridge has been really active in this space for a long time. We started back in 1999 when we supported our first investment in onshore wind. So we've been, pushing ahead in this space and supporting that energy transition for a long time. And we made ESG part of our decision-making process, and it's part of our long-term strategy. And then in 2020, we became very transparent and we upped our game by setting an interim greenhouse gas emission reduction target for intensities of 35% reduction by 2030. And then we've committed to net zero by 2050. So we do know as well that this energy transition where we're at right now is going to be complex. And it doesn't mean that it's like a zero-sum game. We're going to need all forms of energy as we move forward. And I think it's critically important for us to understand how we're going to move forward and the innovation that that's going to take. So whether that's traditional energy, renewables, hydropower, low carbon fuels, and natural gas, that's all really, really important as we work towards those objectives and the key objective of net zero by 2050. And what we have to continue to do is make good use of the infrastructure that we already have so that we can address the affordability issues, but supporting that build out of renewables. But we do know that, solar and wind are intermittent, and they're going to need to be backed up by reliable baseload. So that's just a really critical part of what we're having to do. Now, the only other thing I'd mention too is that on this path, using lots of new things that are underway, it's going to be critically important for us to look at how we get that energy mix in the future. So we need to keep focused on moving on that path forward to make sure that we are actually achieving results. And one of the things that we've heard lately is that across the world, we're going to need more energy. So natural gas is going to provide a really good opportunity, particularly in the US, where we can export our natural gas through LNG to make sure the world is able to meet the climate solutions and that net zero. So we can use US North American natural gas to displace higher emitting fuels throughout the world. And that creates a really great opportunity for the US to lean in and take that role.
Given the current geopolitical context of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, you sort of touched on it, that Europe's serious energy situation and inflation and energy cost increases here at home. What are the biggest challenges that Enbridge has grappled with?
Yeah, when we look at this energy transition, we know it's complex, and we also know that right now, with the world and the geopolitical situation that you mentioned, that there is this demand for affordable, accessible energy. So it's getting that balance, right? We still have this opportunity to be in a leading position in the US and North America to supply energy, affordable energy, and to really look at how we can support that integrated infrastructure and supply chain on a worldwide basis. Some of the challenges that we continue to see, so there's new technologies that are being developed that we're very supportive of. It's getting those to scale. So as we look at that geopolitical situation in Europe, people still want more energy, but they want it to be as green as possible. So it's getting that balance right. And one of the things that I'm most excited about is that we have in our industry really smart people that know how to solve these kinds of problems. So if we can leverage that, so whether it's the new technology, I'll just mention one as we support this energy transition. We're investing in companies like Smart Pipe, where this is new technology that's going to enable hydrogen and carbon dioxide transportation. And this is a high strength composite liner that can put in existing pipelines. So it's making sure that we develop those really smart solutions. But the challenges that we grapple with sometimes are the opportunities that were limited because of things like permitting, or the challenges that companies are facing of building any kind of new infrastructure. So not just the work that we need to do to maintain our existing infrastructure on the natural gas side, or to even expand that where it makes sense to do so, because sometimes even here in the US, you can use natural gas to offset other kinds of higher carbon emitting fuels like coal, or as I mentioned before, having the natural gas support the renewable built out. but it's really hard sometimes to get through the approval and permitting process. So we need to work together with governments and regulators to make sure that there is a clear process that really supports the development of smart, necessary energy infrastructure projects to ensure that people are going to have access both here in North America and the US, as well as supporting what we can in that worldwide geopolitical situation.
I know safety is an important topic in talking about energy infrastructure, and needless to say, a top priority for Enbridge. Can you tell us a little more about some of the measures that are in place to ensure that safety of natural gas pipelines in the region?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So to us, safety isn't just important, it is one of our values, our core values. It's really foundational to everything that we do. And if we don't get safety right, if we can't be safe, nothing else matters. It is our duty to make sure that each and every one of our employees goes home to their family at the end of each day, and for us to also keep the public safe. And that safety also extends to reliably delivering the energy that people need to basically live their lives and heat their homes. So we are always proactively advancing safety in communities, protecting the environment, and that's always going to be our top priority. And the kinds of things that we're doing is to be very, very proactive in our maintenance programs, and particularly our winterization improvement programs, because as you know, in the Northeast, Jim, that's critically important that the heat is there and that the power is there when you have our lovely cold winter season. So we take that very, very seriously to make sure that our assets are robustly maintained. We do extensive asset integrity programs. We make sure that we continually inspect our facilities and that we run these tools that are called smart pigs that go inside our pipelines to inspect the condition of the pipelines and identify any kind of needs, maintenance needs, so that we can be proactive in that space. And then this is all within a very structured program with a lot of federal regulations, as well as our own really high standards in the safety space. We have a gas control center that monitors our gas pipelines on a 24/7, 365 days a year to support those safe operations. And there's lots of information that flows back to that control center that allows us to very quickly identify any kind of operational upset and dispatch local technicians to address any issues. And our pipelines have a lot of safety factors just basically built into them. So there's multiple layers of safety measures that we put in to make sure that safety is really built into everything we do. But the most important thing is that we have the right safety culture. So culture is basically what we're focused on every single day. It is how we interact with each other. It is how we put our safety performance and those metrics first. It's tied to our compensation. It is critically important to us to always make sure that that's the first thing that each of us thinks of at any given moment.
You know, while we're still enjoying the beautiful, beautiful fall weather here in New England, winter is just around the corner. And as the cold weather approaches, are you concerned about pipeline constraints and resulting reliability issues this coming winter?
Yeah. So the wintertime reliability concerns in New England and the serious price spikes that occur and will likely continue into the future is something that's been a topic of conversation for a very long time. So ISO New England, the grid operator, has explained this issue repeatedly, as have many others. Energy experts and regulators know that despite having in the US only a few hundred miles away from New England a really abundant source of American natural gas, New England is constrained in their pipeline system. So there are not enough pipelines serving the regions. And during winter, in particular, when you have these high demand periods, this can lead to some real consequences where you have higher prices for consumers and higher emissions and reliability challenges. So the recently announced increase in electricity costs that's impacting Massachusetts homes and businesses for the upcoming winter is just yet an indicator of what experts have known for years, that the infrastructure supplying New England power plants is constrained and needs to be expanded. So I think it's about 64% of the annualized price increase that's facing electric utility customers is what the customers are facing right now. And that compares to only 20% for the gas utility customers. And the reason that there's that disconnect is because of these structural challenges and the market system. So it's not only that there isn't enough pipeline capacity coming in, it's also that the way that the electrical operators are unable to contract for longer term fixed supply on the natural gas side. So these kind of constraints create these really volatile prices, and they also create an issue where during, winter season, heating season, there's going to be a use of other types of energy, such as, fuel oil that's being used, which has a higher carbon footprint than natural gas. So this all can be very challenging. And I know there's been a lot about that's been in the news. And so we're very concerned as the supplier. We supply about 2 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas into the New England market. And as I mentioned before, we're really critically focused on the reliability of our system. And we do have a really high reliability rate. So that's like 99.9%. But we've also have to do maintenance on our system. And we've identified that we have to do system outages. Now we do our very best to make sure we winterize the system, we do all that maintenance work in off-peak load times, but there is no room for any kind of operational upset. So we all are very concerned. And the kinds of things that we continue to be concerned about is that when you have these kind of spikes, which do occur, they affect the end consumer, the person that's sitting at their kitchen table, paying their bills, and they're having to make these really hard decisions about which bills to pay. And we know that as an energy provider, we need to do everything in our power to try and provide affordable, reliable energy. And as we support that transition to more renewables, we know that there will be opportunities to build renewables in, but there's a cost to that, and renewables are intermittent. So we do need to have that in the overall energy planning that we do. So power generators right now are switching in the winter heating season to those higher emitting fuels. And that's because there isn't enough natural gas. And as we know this year in particular, with the world demand for LNG, New England also imports some LNG into the space in the winter season to support that. It's going to be really hard to both access that gas as well as the price that's going to come with that associated increased needs if you have a really cold winter. So what we would like to see is smart, targeted expansions of the existing natural gas pipeline systems that would allow New England customers to enjoy greater access to, the abundant natural gas supplies that are available in North America. And this would help reduce the energy costs for families and businesses. And it would also allow energy companies to invest in system upgrades and expansions to help consumers meet their needs in a very intelligent, thought-based approach. So this can be and will be part of the transition plan. We do know that it's going to be critically important to try and address these constraints in a very timely manner, because even as we look at that planned energy transition, that's going to take some time. I mentioned earlier that it's really hard to build out any kind of infrastructure. So whether that is natural gas or supporting the natural gas infrastructure, or helping build out natural gas so it can support the intermittent wind and solar, it's really hard to also build out even that wind and solar infrastructure, as well as the interconnecting electricity system. So whether that is, just the required infrastructure for increased electrification, or I know there's been a number of projects proposed to import electricity from other locations. But this needs to be a thoughtful plan, and natural gas needs to be part of that plan.
Since we launched this series last year, I've had the chance to have these conversations with leaders from, a wide variety of industries. And the one common priority for all has been diversity, equity, and inclusion. And can you just tell us, how Enbridge is working to foster more diversity and inclusion in your workforce?
So Jim, this is something that's really close to my heart. I've served as the co-chair currently of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee. And this is a group of our senior leaders at Enbridge who provide advice and direction on connecting our DE&I strategy to our overall business strategy. And I was part of the group at Enbridge that actually helped create the structure for our current DE&I processes. And Enbridge has been doing a lot in that space for our employees. And we want to make sure that we continue to keep employees at the center of everything that we do, because our employees, we're empowering them. We understand that to get to DE&I, and particularly inclusion, that has to be something that comes from our current employee base. We have developed very specific ESG goals with corresponding KPIs around diversity, representation, and employee learning. And we're very transparent with that. So in 2020, when we came out with our emission reduction goals, we also came out with our ESG goals, and we share that and we share our progress. So we've tied our ESG goals to compensation to ensure that we're accountable for that. No different than what we've done for safety, no different than what we've done for our financial performance, and no different than we've done for any one of our other key performance metrics. And those goals right now, we've set a target of 40% women across our employee base, 28% of our team being ethnic and racial diversity groups. And so these are goals that apply across our whole team. So not, frontline leaders right up to our senior executives, as well as we've set goals for board representation. We've also targeted 3.5% of our employees to be Indigenous. And then we've set training targets. So we set a target for all of our employees to complete unconscious bias training and anti-racism training, and 100% completion of Indigenous awareness training. Now, the reason that we set these targets is that, we're kind of that very focused company on delivering to that target. So we wanted to be clear that it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And that this kind of alignment is really important. So right from our front line up to our board. And there's a lot of great things that we're doing to ensure that there is that alignment. So our teams review our progress on those goals at our management meetings. Our board is monitoring our progress, and each of our board committees has oversight to specific areas. And each of our business units, we have 4 main business units that we operate in, plus our corporate office. Each of them are implementing ESG action plans, and that forms part of our scorecards that are linked to our compensation targets. And those, that reporting, that transparency, how we get that alignment, all of that is aligned to basically global standards that are out there as to how you progress in this DE&I space. We also have basically making specific inroads in areas like Indigenous reconciliation and partnerships. We've made that a priority. And we recently announced a landmark partnership with 23 First Nations and Métis communities, where the communities are acquiring collectively, they're getting together and they're buying 11.5%, just over 11.5%. It's non-operating interest in 7 Enbridge operated pipelines in it's the Athabasca region in northern Alberta. And that's basically just over a $1.1 billion investment, Canadian dollars. But, that's the kind of thing that we're doing to make sure that we're credible in this space and that we're making a difference, and it's embedded into our day-to-day operating practices. Now, I'll just, give us a bit of a shout out here, is because we're so active in that space and we're leading, we have been very fortunate to have been recognized, particularly this year. We received the 2022 Catalyst Award. Our one employee resource group, our feminine group, so that's females in engineering, received the Ally Energy Grid Award. We've been recognized by the National Diversity Council, Canada's Best Diversity Employers, and many other things. So we're making, and there's one more thing that I'll just note here, is that we're making really strong progress. So when we first started down this path and we first started putting targets out there, we keep hitting those targets. So whether it was in having more women at leadership level, that's where we first started. We wanted to have our first target of 30%. We hit that, we exceeded that. And this is a path. So we measure our progress, we're transparent. And the other thing that we do that's probably unique, and one of the things that we did receive, partly why we received the Catalyst Award, was that level of transparency. We have this dashboard that everybody in an organization can access to see what the numbers look like for each of these groups, that drills down to each kind of department. So having that transparency, having those goals, and then measuring our progress is making sure that we're really making an impact in this area.
Well, congratulations on receiving these recognitions, but obviously you demonstrate a great deal of compassion on this issue. I mean, this is something obviously that's very personal for you to achieve these goals. It's not just lip service. You really are living this example and making sure that your company is reflective of society and very diversified. And kudos to you and all of the good work that you're doing there. So,
no, thanks, Jim. I think the thing that we do this because not only is it the right thing to do, it's also really good for business results. Like if you look at any of the research, the one stat that we always look at, it's like you can get 30% more out of people if they feel fully engaged and fully included at work. There's nothing else that you can do to increase your productivity by 30%.
the New England Council focuses on, federal policy and how it impacts our region here. We always like to end these conversations talking about what's going on in Washington, D.C., especially given the recent midterm election, to say the least. But earlier this year, Congress passed and President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which makes the single largest investment in climate and energy in American history. How do you see this landmark legislation impacting the energy industry?
Yeah. So we do see the value of having these incentives for companies when it comes to that low carbon development. And as I said before, Enbridge and I believe that it's going to be that all of the above approach to move to that lower carbon economy. There's no one single path. We're going to have to use everything that we have now, plus everything that we can develop in the future. So while we're going to continue to invest in conventional energy infrastructure and modernizing, one of the opportunities for us on this pathway is to modernize our existing assets so that we can reduce our carbon emissions there. So whether that is, methane capture, reducing our blowdowns, or electrifying our compression where we can, or pairing that up with our own behind the meter solar installations where we need power. There's a whole bunch of things that we're doing in that space. And we want to also be that leader in that low carbon energy technology and options. So besides the stuff that we're doing just directly for our business, we're very involved in renewable natural gas. We made a number of direct investments in our utility. We have partnerships in the US with Vanguard, where we're advancing direct investments in RNG. We're partnering to develop carbon capture and sequestration, both in Canada and in the US. We're developing hydrogen projects. We've done some really great stuff in our utility in Canada, where we've invested in hydrogen fuel cells, and that's critically important for the future. And what the new Inflation Reduction Act and these new investment opportunities are going to do in the US is provide some benefits. These incentives are going to help companies like us continue to invest even more and accelerate our investment in these low carbon opportunities. So the wind, solar, carbon capture, and then hydrogen. And that will allow us to more effectively advance the technologies and increase the innovation in this sector. I mentioned before how critically important it is to tap into the collective knowledge that our industry has. We can figure out energy solutions. We've been doing it for a long time. We have really smart people. And it's really important that we lever that. As we look at the low carbon space, that is going to be critically important to really tap into the knowledge that we have and allow us to accelerate that. So the tax incentives are really appealing. And we have to see how it's all going to shake out and how the financing comes together and where the investments are. But it is a really good starting point to move us along that path. The second piece of the puzzle is something that I touched on, a challenge for us, and I think a challenge for industry, and not just a challenge for us in our traditional space, but as we evolve in the new energy space as well. It's the permitting process, and we're going to have to really work together to solve that. So the midterm elections, hopefully we'll have provided an opportunity for a bipartisan path to do that, to get together and have a path forward for permitting. So this isn't an issue that's just impacting, the traditional energy space. It is also impacting the development of all of these renewables and the new low carbon opportunities that are out there. So the IRA legislative provisions have offered, lots of money and dollars for carbon capture and hydrogen fuel projects that are going to be implemented. And I think Enbridge is really keen to be a part of that. And so I'm really excited about what that future will be with those opportunities to really accelerate that path forward.
My last question was the question that you just touched on, and that is what changes to regulatory policy would make it easier to address New England's energy challenges? And you talked about the permitting process being one area. Is there any other areas?
I think it's really critical that we have to maintain and modernize the current infrastructure systems. So we need them for now to provide safe, affordable, and reliable energy, as I've talked about, right? These things are critically important. We're dependent on them. There's no quick fix. It's going to take a while, and it's going to take some time, and it's going to be complex as we move through the transition. And then we need to maintain that existing infrastructure to support the transition to the lower carbon future. And the permitting predictability and the process adherence, that's really critical to maintaining our current energy infrastructure and for the investment and build out of the new lower carbon energy future. It's really hard to invest a whole bunch of money in something new if you don't have that clarity. It's even hard for us to maintain the existing system and to have that high standard of reliability and safety if we don't have clarity in the permitting system. And, you know, the incentives that are there now to support the investments, to modernize our energy systems and advance that, without that durable permitting and the reform that's going to take to get there, that I think is really threatening the lower carbon economy. If you can't figure out how to permit any infrastructure that's going to be built out, all of the infrastructure that we need to build out is going to require some kind of collaboration over a range. Nothing can be just in one permitting, one state, one county, one jurisdiction. We're going to have to figure out how to do this. So the policy puzzle right now is not very complete. So there is not good alignment between, you know, these investment signals that say, hey, go ahead, it's all right to invest now. There's going to be support for that investment, but we don't know how we're going to actually get it built. So that clarity needs to be there so that we can advance these individual energy projects and across the energy landscape. And I think that that's going to be necessary for that energy infrastructure to advance in a timely and inclusive manner and to make sure it's affordable. One of the things that we do know is when you get into some of these existing permitting challenges is that you see the timelines drag out and the costs drag out. And all of that is going to create this headwind that I don't think is going to support this transition. So we're going to need to create allies, and it's not even just something that we need to do at a municipal level or a state level or a federal level. Some of these challenges that we're seeing, particularly now with what's happening with global instability because of the Ukraine situation, is that we're going to have global allies. This is going to take all of us figuring out how to do things together. And the current slow and, dare I say, inefficient permitting process for energy infrastructure project is going to discourage private sector investments. It's going to delay new projects, and it's going to undermine the value for any kind of taxpayer investments. So it's great that we have all these incentives out there, but unless you can get that alignment and unless you can get that clarity, we're not going to be able to support this transition in a timely, effective way. So, you know, I don't think that the US will be able to meet its energy or climate goals, including unlocking more than 3 trillion of clean energy investments over the next decade unless we get permitting reform in place. So more than 80% of the potential emissions reductions that will be delivered by the IRA will be lost in the US energy infrastructure expansions if we don't have any changes. So we have to speed up the permitting process. We have to streamline what that process is. And we have to make sure that both renewables and conventionals have that opportunity to really support the economy as we build out. And, you know, I think that's so critical for us to figure out how to build that clean economy as we go forward, to power our homes, to run our businesses, to, you know, transport us and for us to live our lives. So that's going to require, I think, some additional bipartisan and common sense reforms that would enable us to have these numerous new energy infrastructure projects that are going to strengthen our energy security in the US and allow us to meet our climate goals and create great new American jobs. But it's going to be really hard to do that if we don't have that clarity, and you can't get all that incredible investment power behind that.
Are you optimistic?
I'm always optimistic. One of the things that I've seen happen as I've come into my new role, I started here out of the Houston office at the beginning of March. So when things were really heating up in the space, I think what I've seen even in that time of crisis was that people then were really wanting to get into, well, how do I make this work? So as I see what's happening in the conversations at COP27, I see that people in general are acknowledging that we have to do something slightly different than what we've been doing so far because we're not advancing in the way we want to. So the opportunity to look at things differently, the opportunity to engage in really meaningful conversations instead of just saying, well, here's the path. I want to be net zero by 2050. We see a lot of conversations happening now as to, well, what's that actually going to take? And how are we going to do this together to meet those goals? And the other thing that I'm really optimistic about is we know that we need to make sure that the voting public, the person who pays all of our bills at the end of the day, that elects our politicians, that helps determine everybody, that affordability is a critical part of that solution. And that there is really positive intent now to say, all right, let's get down to business. Let's figure out what that path forward. And I know that collectively the existing participants in the traditional energy infrastructure have such capabilities, have such great assets and great locations, including Enbridge, and the assets that we use to supply our energy into the New England market, that we have great assets, great locations, great connectivity, and we can work together to figure out a solution that's going to reduce our carbon emissions over the long term.
Well, we want to thank you, Cynthia, for a very informative discussion here this morning on energy and energy outlook here in New England. So I just want to thank you again. Thank all of our viewers who participated today. And the only thing I can say is stay warm. But again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.